And Robbie, let him in.
Holy moly, here we are back again. Do we look relaxed? We are, because this is the Flying by the Seat of Your Pants Bird Festival. And we have just had some technical issues trying to get someone on a satellite connection from out in the hinterlands trying to connect, but we did it. Bob is amazing. We've got some technical abilities back here. We're going to do something we've never had. We had to have our presenter shoot their slideshow to us so we can forward it. But you know what? It's no big deal because we are flying by the seat of our pants. We are going to skip some of the normal opening slides and all that stuff. Just want to let you know these things are being recorded, and those recordings are available right now on the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival site. We will also put that link in the chat. So if you want to have a record of that, you can go to the chat. You can also find it on the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival Facebook and Instagram pages, so you can get any of the events that you missed. But right now we are really happy to have Mary Whitfield, and Mary Whitfield is going to be presenting on something I have a really keen interest in. She is the research director at the Southern Sierra Research Station. She holds a bachelor's in wildlife and fisheries biologist from Davis and a master's from CSU Chico, and she's got over 30 years of fieldwork experience in the US and also in a number of Latin American countries. Her research includes conservation biology, breeding ecology of the willow flycatcher, the brown-headed cowbird, the yellow-billed cuckoo, behavioral ecology, full life cycle research, and riparian systems. She's actively involved with Partners in Flight, Western Working Group for over 10 years, and is currently leading the Western Motus initiative for that group. And that's what the presentation is on today, Motus. And I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to find out pretty soon. So Mary, take it from here. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share.
Okay, great. Yeah, as soon as the presentation is up, I can start it. But one thing that a lot of people, especially scientists that work in geography, when they hear Motus, they think of MODIS, which is very different than Motus with a T. So that is one thing that a lot of times people get confused with when they just hear it verbally. So basically, welcome to my talk on Motus and the Western Motus Initiative. Next. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, how do I advance these, Mary?
There should be like an arrow to the right underneath it, maybe, or a lot of times your up and down buttons can do it too. If you have it on your PowerPoint.
None of those are advancing. Give me a second here.
Okay.
So as you can see, we got something. Okay,
right.
so Bob figured it out. Here you go, Bob.
All right, yeah. So this afternoon, I'm briefly going to go over the following topics: full life cycle, the importance of full life cycle conservation, Motus technology, the Motus initiative, how you can apply Motus, the applications, and how to help. Next, please. Yeah, so as many of you know, neotropical migrants are birds that breed in the US and Canada and winter in Latin America. For many years, ecologists have recognized that conservation measures on the breeding grounds of migrant songbirds may not succeed if non-breeding season ecology is not understood and stopover and winter habitat is not protected. That is, full life cycle ecology, or at least another way of putting it, is full life cycle ecology is critical for bird conservation. Unfortunately, for most migrants, little is known of their movements and ecology during the non-breeding season. Next slide, please. So tracking animals is a way to identify important sites during the year. There are a number of tools we can use to get at pieces of this puzzle: GPS satellites, light level geolocators, banding, and radio telemetry. And banding and radio telemetry are some of the oldest methods. But recent technological advances has breathed new life into radio telemetry, specifically through digitally coded tags and automated radio telemetry systems. Next, please. So Motus is, Motus is just another tool in the toolbox. It's an automated radio telemetry system. It can't replace all the other ways to track animals, but it complements them. And what tool you use depends on your research question and your budget. So, and a lot of times, a lot of these tools are used together. For example, pretty much all these birds that we tag are banded as well. And so the right here we show a banded willow flycatcher, a yellow-billed cuckoo with a satellite tag, a poorwill with a light level geolocator, and a bat with a Motus tag. Next. So what is Motus? It's an automated radio telemetry system that uses digital radio tags that are on the same frequency. So those frequencies in North America are 166.38, and then there's also a 434. Those are the two frequencies that's used in Motus. Stations will operate continuously with up to 8 directional antenna. The detection distance is up to 10 to 20 kilometers, depending on your antenna and the line of sight. And there's relatively high temporal and geographic precision. And one of the most important things are animals don't need to be recaptured. However, the tags don't work well when birds are in heavy cover, for example, under canopy cover, dense vegetation, etc. They also don't give precise locations. So it's wherever, whatever the distance of that antenna can go to. So, within maybe 10 kilometers or so where the bird might be, depending on the habitat though. If there's just little habitat within that area, it can usually pinpoint better. But you can also obtain more precise views by using a traditional receiver and Yagi antenna. So a lot of these projects use both the Motus receivers, plus they'll also go out and do hand tracking as well to complement that. Next, please. So again, to answer the question of what Motus is it's a collaborative international research network using a common community infrastructure that uploads into a centralized database with public data and visualizations. And it's a program of Birds Canada in partnership with collaborating researchers and organizations. Next, please. So here's a little schematic showing how Motus works. So you have the researchers that tag the bird. The bird flies by a receiving station, and then the receiving station collects that data from the tag or the signal, and it sends it off to the database. Now, that information can go to the database a few different ways. One way is if it's already hooked up to a Wi-Fi system, it just does it all the time, and it just does it automatically, so in real time. Another way it can be sent in real time is through cellular data. So some of these stations have cellular little chip cards, so it can use that the cell system to upload it. If you're in a more remote area, then you may need to use the researchers have to visit the station periodically, upload the data onto their computer, and then when they get back, they upload it into the Motus database. From the Motus database, it could go to other data portals such as MoveBank or the Avian Knowledge Network. And the public can see it either through Motus or through some of these other websites. And this can lead to conservation science, where the people who tag the bird can come up with, use the data to come up with conservation recommendations and actions. Next, please. So Motus first started in 2014, and I first became interested in Motus, I think it was about in late 2016. And basically at that time period, there was quite a number of Motus stations in the West, in the East, and it was built up fairly nicely there, but there weren't too many in the West. Next. So there's a lot of issues in the West that make it challenging to build a Motus network here. First of all, there's the lack of coverage. And so you can run into this chicken and egg problem. You get somebody interested in doing some Motus research in the West, but if there aren't any stations, they don't really feel like tagging birds because they're not likely to be picked up. Whereas if you, and then if there aren't many birds tagged in the West, then nobody wants to put up a station because they're not likely to get tagged birds. So you have to come up with a strategy to overcome that. Next, please. So as I wanted to point out before, there's hardly any coverage there, at least at that time in late 2017, there was virtually no coverage in the West. So another problem was lacking much research or much knowledge of migrating birds in the West. Bailey et al. In 2018 synthesized over 160 published papers to gather current knowledge of neotropical stopover regions and migratory bottlenecks. And so one of the things that they decided needed some definition are the differences between true stopover sites versus rest roost stops. And they're both very important. And then also identifying bottlenecks, which are extremely important areas. Next, please. So basically, one of the main things that they did locate some neotropical or identify those bottleneck sites, but one of their main things that came out of this analysis was that results from the West are scant, and Western migration is poorly understood compared to Eastern birds. And if you look on those bottleneck sites at that ID, it's mostly Eastern-based birds, and that's because not many birds in the West were being followed compared to the East. Next, please. So another problem. Next slide. Yeah. Slide, please. Oh, I guess I got ahead of the slide. Sorry about that. And then on this slide, this is where I say that basically pointing out that the West, there isn't as much study of Western migrants or migration. Next slide, please. So another problem is topography and scale, and you just have extreme diversity in climate in the West. So basically, our initiative, we have the modest goal of going from Alaska to the Tierra del Fuego, and that's just merely an estimated 36 million square kilometers. And that covers a huge, variation in climate, various climates from, Arctic waters to Antarctic waters, really, and also to desert areas. You have high mountain areas with challenges. You have steep canyons. And then you also have areas that are in the middle of nowhere and various places throughout the West, including South America. Next, please. So basically, partners in flight seem to be a natural avenue to help get Motus in the West, because the way that partners in flight solves problems is similar to the way that Motus is working to answer questions. And so basically, it's looking at, and these are some of the ways that they're similar. And so we work in a coordinated, collaborative, international approach to solve complex conservation problems, expand the scope and spatial scale of research questions during all phases of the annual cycle. And so we plan to initiate the build, or we started initiating the build of the Western Motus network around local and regional questions, but focused on species and conservation challenges of continental hemispheric scope. And so that was the way we were trying to get around that chicken and egg problem. And so the initiative seeks to understand what limits bird populations currently and in the future, and this will require tracking birds across their entire annual and perhaps their entire life cycle. Next, please. So a big purpose of this is to provide better information to assess threats to migratory bird populations in an era of rapid, global change. Western North America is experiencing emerging threats to bird populations, and climate change and related impacts are numerous and growing. These threats include increased changes in surface and water temperatures, and higher rates of transpiration leading to a decrease in water availability due to shrinking lakes in the Southwest and Intermountain West. Increased air temperatures are also increasing water stress in forests and leading to forest dieback in many regions, and increased fire seasons across most forested and grassland and chaparral regions in the West. Coastal birds will continue to be impacted by changes in ocean conditions, including ocean acidification and sea level rises. Human disturbance in coastal stopover areas can also impact bird use of key stopover and rest sites. Next, please. The Partners in Flight Western Working Group Motus Initiative began in 2018 with the goal to expand the Motus network in the West from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. Since then, interest in Motus has snowballed despite the challenges of COVID-19. Next, please. Okay, and hit the button again. So these maps show our progress. So this first map shows what the Motus network looked like when we first released our initiative in 2018. Next. So this was about a year out. So it looked like we were making some good progress. Next slide, please. And this last one was basically when we released a prospectus. This is what we were hoping that the network would look like by 2021. And when 2020 hit us, we just thought that was not going to be really good for the Motus networks, but we were hoping we'd still at least reach that 120 stations. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is again showing you that projected what we were hoping it would look like. Okay, next slide. So this is actually what it ended up, started looking like, what it looked like in August of 2021. Which was actually pretty good. It looked like despite 2020, we were really hitting our targets and the network was looking pretty good. Next slide, please. So this other slide shows what the network should look like relatively soon, within the next 3 months or so or less. So the dots, orange dots, are projects that we currently know are already funded, and some of them have actually already gone up and are actually yellow dots now. So if you look at this, what it's going to look like within a couple months or so, we really exceeded our 2021 projections, which is really exciting to us, that's for sure. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an animation that's going to show you the growth. So go ahead and hopefully the animation will start going. I think you might, yeah, you can see that. So if you look in that left corner, it shows you the dates and how the network is growing through time. Now 2021 is the time that it really takes off. Yeah, so you could see how it really grew over time, and it just rapidly, especially at the end of 2021, it was crazy. A lot of stations came up those last few months. So basically, by the middle of this year, we're projecting that there should be more than 250 stations built in the West. So here, if you hit the next button, please. So if you want to just look at sheer the growth by numbers, this is what it looks like. And as I mentioned earlier, there should be, in a couple months, there should be more than 250 stations in the West. Next, please. And so if you want to look at it also, how the growth in tagged birds is going, you can see it's also growing. And I project that in 2022, actually, that growth is going to be even greater at a more rapid pace. Now that we have a nice basis of stations, a lot more birds will be tagged. Next, please. So these are some of the key priorities of the PIF Western Working Group initiative. And one thing I'd like to point out that when you install stations in Latin America, those stations in Latin America tend to get at least 3 times, if not more, detections on average than those north of the U.S. border. And it makes sense if you think of how basically you have these birds that are being tagged throughout North America and how large that area is, and then they funnel into Mexico and then Central America, which is really narrow. So these birds are a lot more concentrated in those areas, and that's why we tend to get more detections of those birds when you have stations in Latin America. Next, please. So here's an example of a study of Western sandpipers and semi-palmated plovers. Some movement data that are now being collected with the current setup. So basically, you can see some of those movements. However, the lack of stations in between points and further south makes some of these pathways incomplete. So hopefully, as this number of stations increase, we'll have even better data in the future. Next, please. So this study of Western sandpipers and semi-palmated plovers involved collaborators in the US, Canada, and Mexico, and it has brought groups together in all 3 countries to collaborate on joint projects. In the spring of 2019, Partners in Flight and Pacific Flyway International Connections were instrumental in establishing one of the first Western Motus stations in the continental US at Grays Harbor in northwestern Washington, which is a critical stopover area for shorebirds. Next, please. So another example of international collaborations and another example of other data that has been collected with Motus is these projects on blackpoll warblers done by students at Acadia University in Canada. Next, please. So this is a study that examined the movements of blackpoll warblers during the non-breeding season. So they banded them in during fall migration, and they found that this population of blackpoll warblers departed from the Atlantic coast during the autumn migration, traveled approximately 3,000 miles, or 3,000 kilometers, I mean, over water to South America, and then returned in the spring using a different overland route up the Atlantic coast of North America. So next slide, please. So here's another study using the same tower setup and looking at a different aspect of blackpoll warbler ecology. So they were examining the post-breeding movements of adult and juveniles. So they captured adult and hatching year birds. And if you look at the black dots, those are telemetry towers. The green lines are adult movements, and the brown, orangey brown lines are hatch year birds. The final detections of each individual are represented by an open dot. So those open dots are when the birds finally just took off and started really heading south. And one of the things they found with this study is that the adults pretty much, once they were captured, they started heading southwest and fueled up and then took off for their wintering sites, whereas the young stayed around longer, and they pretty much just stayed around land. If you look in those orange areas, and they exhibited an exploratory behavior more so than the adults did. So the theory being that maybe they were looking at new sites that they may come back to in the following spring if they survive the winter. Next slide, please. So now that you have some idea of the cool data that you can collect using from Motus, here are some ideas that can help speed up and expand the building of Motus stations that will hopefully be there for the long term. So you can help fund a Motus station in nearby strategic area, or tags for a project. Help fund more trained people throughout a region become a trained person, or help someone run a workshop, perhaps. It could use funding for coordinated efforts to put tags on priority bird species in various areas during their life cycle. And outreach for multiple groups. There's a nice education component for Motus, and the Motus website and the organization supports has a lot of education tools for educators to maybe sponsor a station, and there's education modules that teachers can use for teaching their students more about bird conservation and movements. And yeah, and so next slide, please. And so here's a few potential groups with current Motus projects that can use some help. This is just a small number of different organizations, and I'm sure you can probably find some other ones besides these ones as well. Okay, next. So join us. The more people that can work with us throughout the West, the better off we are. And it's critically important to find more partners from Latin America, because most of the birds do spend the majority of their life there, yet little is known about that time period for most species. And the one other thing I wanted to mention as well is there are some regional Motus groups, and the number of regional groups is growing. And we have just started a California working group for Motus. And we're going to be coming up with a strategic plan for building Motus fences across California to help strategically detect birds as they move through the state. And that's it. Any questions?
What does a Motus station cost?
Yeah, that's a common question, and you'd think it would be a simple one, but it really is not. It really, so much of it depends on where the station is located. So the range is probably maybe as inexpensive as $3,000 to up to $10,000. It really depends on whether there's power to it, whether there's already a structure that you can put it to, and Wi-Fi, and how hard the logistics of getting to the site.
Okay, if you are a participant here and if you've got some questions for Mary, you can throw those in the chat. You can chat directly to me, or that's probably the best way. And then I will ask Mary questions. It might go to Mary, it might go to everyone, but we'll try to get your questions out. Mary, I had to step away just for 1 minute when I think you were giving cost, and I wanted to know, my question was the same as Bob's. What does a station cost? And then what does a tag cost? You may have mentioned that already.
No, I have not mentioned the tag cost. The tag, it goes from about, probably it's saying 250, average is around 250, about $250, though some of the other tags may be a little over 300. So they're not super expensive. And especially compared to satellite tags, it's cheap.
Okay.
I mean, a satellite tag is several $1,000s, plus you have to pay for the data, which can be pretty expensive.
Right. I will tag my raptors with a radio tag, and I put on this harness. Do you use a harness sort of system for the birds as well? Or is it, how do you attach the tag?
No, there's a harness system. And the cool thing with some of these bigger birds, when you use the frequency of 424, it's the company CTT, Cellular Tracking Technologies. They make these tags for the larger birds that are not only transmitters, but they can be receivers too. So as it's flying around, it may detect other birds that are tagged at that 424 frequency and send that data back as well, which is really cool.
Okay, that's just crazy. That's really wild. You put one of those on a Cooper's hawk and you get all kinds of interesting tag readings, I'm sure.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, yep. Another question from me, and then we'll get to the questions in the chat. You said something about volunteers and manning. You know, there's a lot of us retired folks that got nothing to do except volunteer somewhere. Do you take volunteers from retired folks, or do you just need the young and able who are out there stomping around in the hills?
Well, it's mostly, I mean, for when you're actually tagging the birds, you want somebody who has that experience of doing those leg loop harnesses, and so those people are far and few between. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess it really depends on the station and their setup, on how much they can handle and how much they're willing to train people on how to do that.
Okay.
But there's also volunteers for, helping build the Motus stations as well. I mean, we haven't been able to use that as much because of COVID-19, but in the future, hopefully that'll be easier. And some of the people that are the most helpful are people that have built things. They can come up with ideas of ways to put stations up, because a lot of times it's a lot of problem solving on figuring out the best way or the best site for siting a Motus station as well. And then people who are ham radio operators are sometimes the most helpful, because they can really help out on a lot of the technical issues with Motus.
I know one of those. He's the guy who put together your program and pushed the go button.
Okay.
He's a ham.
I had a semi-technical question.
Yeah.
I assume these kind of like the birds are acting kind of like an RFID, if you will, similar to an RFID. But from the station, when they fly by, you detect them because you're essentially getting the back from them. But do you get direction to the bird, and is there any distance from the station, or are you just detecting they're within the range of the? That
You
makes sense.
you can get detection when you have multiple antennas. You can get detection because it's whatever way that antenna's pointing. And then
Okay.
sometimes if they're going, sometimes they go across several antennas, and so you can get the direction that they're flying too.
Good. Roy Poucher says, what does Motus mean? How did the name get arrived at?
That is a good question. I think somebody told me at one point in time, and now I don't remember. So
That's why we have
unfortunately, I
Google.
can't answer that question. Yeah.
Okay, that's why we have Google. Somebody else, Aaron asked, how about any issues with interference like home Wi-Fi and a Motus station? Are there other ways that interference comes into play?
Yeah, you can. I don't think you get interference from Wi-Fi as much as maybe interference sometimes from other radio, anything else sending out radio signals or things that tend to interfere with that. So occasionally you can, but we have ways that you can test that interference when you're putting up the antenna to see before you put it in its final place, how much interference you're getting.
Okay, I know that when I do radio tracking of my Raptors, my transmitter has a specific number. Do your tags have a specific number for a specific bird, or is it just a general number?
Yeah, so the way it works is they're just one, because yeah, your birds have slightly different frequencies, and that's how how you tell them apart.
Right.
So that's the old way. So this other way is now they can have a single frequency and they digitally code, so you can tell individuals apart. So with the 166.38, that frequency has less. I think it might have like a million or maybe hundreds of thousands of different combinations. And that's why the 434 is also another frequency, because that pretty much has unlimited digital combinations. So you
Okay,
can tell
great.
individuals apart.
So Aaron just said, if you're looking for a spot in Contra Costa, she's got 1,000 acres and at 1,000 feet, and she would love to have a station on her property. Are you looking for property owners as well as money to put that together?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the Bay Area that are working on putting up Motus stations, and they're part of that strategic working group. So if you send me at my email address your information, and I can pass that along to the groups that are doing Motus
Great.
work in the Bay Area.
Great. I may have said that wrong. I may have said 1,000 acres. It's 7.5 acres at 1,000 feet elevation.
Which is,
Anyway.
yeah, no, that works. I mean, the stations don't take up that much room, so it's great.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have a question? Jump right in on the chat and throw us a question. And so Mary, again, how long have you been involved directly with Motus compared to the other things you've been doing in your life?
Well, Motus, I really didn't get involved until 2017. And so it's a lot shorter time period than some of the other research I've been doing.
Right. Okay. We just threw your email up to everyone. So there are,
Okay.
let's see, there's about 80, 90 people on the site right now. So if you want to donate money, if you want to get your property used, if you want to donate time, you want to buy a few trackers for the research scientists to put up, just email Mary and she will get to you. We're going to close down in a couple of minutes, so I'm open for one or two more questions, and then we're going to go. Let's see, what's the size of a station? Bonnie wants to know. Is it like the size of a refrigerator or a garage or what?
No, so basically the little box at the station itself is fairly small, but it's really that mast with the antennas that kind of make it a little bigger. But it's really not too big. It's I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm not sure if that one picture. You're not screen sharing anymore, so that you can't see that picture, but
I'm working on it.
it's probably, well, it's probably about the size, of basically you could take like for those who remember what they look like, the old-fashioned TV antennas.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's, the size of the antennas, and then you just have like a little box below that. So it's really not too large.
Okay. Can I put one on top of my fuel station? It looks
Probably,
like right there in the shared picture that Bob had. Oh,
yeah,
I don't know if you can see the shared picture. It looked like a farmyard fuel station.
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, if I have some land, and if I maybe have a little bit of money, and if I have a footprint the size of maybe a garden shed, and especially if there's electricity or some Wi-Fi going to it, it might be worth calling the Motus folks and say I'm willing to have a station on my site.
Yeah, though, I mean, basically it's part of the priority and whether there's funding to put the station, but it's good to know when there's willing landowners, and they would probably just keep that. I don't know if they keep a database, or we would actually keep track of that probably as probably the California Strategic Working Group would.
Where's the nearest station in the Central Coast?
The nearest station, well, there will be one really soon, hopefully, in a couple months at, trying to remember the name of that really awesome Dangerman Preserve that TNC owns. They want us to put a station there, and they're funding that, and for us to go put one up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Roy Poucher, and this is our last note. Roy Poucher got his Google going, and he looked up the Motus website, and Motus is Latin for motion movement. So
Sounds perfect.
it's
Yep,
Latin
that's
for
great.
motion and movement. Okay, thanks, Mary, for your expertise, for your years and years in the field, and for your years here with the Motus. It was really amazing and interesting to hear all about that. So
Yeah, thank you.
So thanks again. We'll send you a t-shirt or a hat or something like that. That's about the best we can do at this
No
point.
problem. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. And thank you everybody for watching.
Okay, as Bob puts up the last slide, this again is our donation slide. If you've got money sitting around in your pocket and you don't know what to do with it, you can either donate it to the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival, one of those 4 or 5 ways, or you can just go, email Mary, and she can put you in touch with the Motus folks, and put your name on a Motus station someplace and add to science that way. Next up, we have 2 hours worth of John Muir laws. So if you've got a social media account someplace, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok or whatever, get out there on the next 5 minutes and invite all your friends, because we'd like them to come. Hey, we have 1,000 seats. And we usually fill up 250, maybe sometimes 300 seats. Means we have room for 700 of your friends. So get out there and spread the word about John Muir Laws. He's going to be with us next. And then after that, after those next 2 hours, we got Heather Hayes talking about tracking of the long-billed curlew, and that's out of Idaho project. But it's our bird. It's our bird. So we feel really connected to this one, because it's our long-billed curlew out in the bay right now. And then Claudia is going to talk to us about shorebirds in the evening. So we're going to punch out here. And if you want to come back to John Muir Laws, go into the top of the hour, same time, same Zoom room. You know the code. You know how to get it done. Go advertise to your friends, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thanks again, Mary. Bye-bye.